Hi folks, we're Tacitus today at your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about developments in New York City in the United States and the very socialist, Marxist, communist talk about how they're going to deal with private property, and in particular rental properties, but more generically. Now, the socialist mayor who walks around in sharp suits, the socialist mayor of New York City, Mamdani, Zoran Mamdani, he has appointed a lady, as far as I know, she's a Jewish lesbian, Marxist Jewish lesbian, called Sia Weaver. Now, she's got a real thing about hating on white people, hating on Christians, hating on white people who own property. So she's been put in charge again of sort of looking after property rentals and that whole ecosystem, if I can use that overused phrase. And she's got some fairly radical but very socialist Marxist ideas about how to solve the problem. The core of the problem she keeps coming back to in her numerous social media posts. The core of the problem is it's those damn fucking white people. It's those white Christians, the fucking damn Nazis. We get rid of them, problem gone, problem solved. Everything will just magically fall into place. Now, that's the reasoning power of a 2-year-old. And the way she talks and the way she forms her thoughts and explains them, I don't think mentally she's much above being a 2-year-old. Nonetheless, let's look at the overall architecture, if you like, the architecture of logic, the architecture of reality, and the architecture of the possible in this idea of New York property or property rental we'll focus on, and just see where we go with this, because there's some very real problems. Now, the idea of slum lords and slum tenements and badly maintained tenement buildings, whether they be government owned or not, this has been a big issue since, for a long time, but it was mentioned a lot in movies in the 1970s. It was particularly concentrated around black neighborhoods. So it was seen, certainly as it was portrayed, back in the day, and when I was a young man, when I first went to New York, it was portrayed as a uniquely black problem. The black people lived in these slum tenements, and because of rent control, so the argument went, because of rent control meant that the property owners couldn't increase the rent. And in the case of government-owned buildings, where the rents, because say the black person's unemployed and on welfare, then they effectively wouldn't pay any rent. So the government would be unable to maintain these properties, the black tenanted properties, to a high standard. In the case of private ownership of property, but where there was also rent control, and again, primarily this affected back in the day blacks. I first came to my sort of obvious attention, say, in the 1980s. So, and because the rent control was such that the property owner couldn't make a profit, and so they didn't engage in proper property maintenance. So and so this meant the tenements, the apartments were maintained to a low standard or poorly maintained, and there were things like plumbing not working, this sort of thing, and walls where the paint was peeling off, where the plaster was falling, where the floorboards were rotting away, and this type of thing. So was this going on? Well, yes, so it was, and did happen. How widespread we could debate, but it was happening. But it was confined again to the black tenanted properties. It didn't appear to be a problem. May have been for some anyway, but it didn't appear to be a problem outside of that. So let's look at the economics of this now. One of the things that was noted in say, when there was a big moves in the 1950s to have to ask the question, why are white schools for kids. Why are white high schools in much better shape and condition than black high schools? Why is it that the white high schools have heaters that work all year round or all through the winter and so on, and the black schools don't? Why is it that the black schools have leaking roofs? Why is it that the black schools have less gym equipment? And why is it that in classes like carpentry, woodwork classes, that the black classes have far fewer tools and equipment to try teach the kids with? Why is that? It must be because of racism. It must be because the fucking Nazis are doing it. Nazis, that's what it is. Hitler, swastika. That's the reason. That's the problem. Now, when you have a closer look, you find out that's not the problem. The vandalism in the black schools by the black students is off the charts. So the maintenance budget, which is exactly the same as the white school on a per student basis, the maintenance budget has to stretch a lot further. It's got to repair a lot of vandalism, has to replace a lot of stolen equipment, such as, tools out of the woodworking class and all that sort of stuff. So the budget has to go a lot further, which means if they're going to replace the heaters in there, and then they don't have the money within the budget to go and to fix the leaking roof. And so that was what the problem was. The white kids weren't vandalizing and stealing stuff at anywhere near the rate that the black students were. Therefore, that was the difference in the outcomes. It wasn't nothing to do with racism. Now, the same could be said if you look more closely at the black tenanted slums. The damage and the vandalism that the black tenants do, and the level of criminal behaviour, all this sort of stuff, makes it unlivable. The amount of times that doors are broken down and kicked in, that there's all sorts of violence and again vandalism and so on, means that the property owner has to spend in proportion a lot more money. Why should a property? Well, why do I have to do that? This is the 10th time this year that the black tenant or people that come to visit them have kicked down the door and torn out the door jamb, torn out part of the wall. Why do I have to keep repairing that? Says the property owner. Too bad. If they're going to be that careless about maintaining the property they live in, then why should I have to throw more money at it? And I can't claim any more tax deduction, so I'm now having to pay directly out of my own pocket for the maintenance of the building. And there's certainly an argument to be had there, and I do sympathise with it. On the basis of rent control, should all property be at market rates? Well, again, coming back to rental property in this case, should all property be at rentals be at market rates? If you've got a full-time job, I guess, yeah, why not? If you're on welfare, there is a case for temporary rent control, I think. So, okay, fine. Now, as we look through the entire welfare and cost, who can afford to pay type landscape, back certainly when I first started, renting, it took 20% of someone's, in fact, less than that. As you say you use 1970 as the baseline. It was less than 20%, and I'm assuming a one-bedroom city apartment here, and I'll use that as because those are, most of those in Sydney at least are being built now. There's a lot of them in New York too. Less than 20% of your income would go on. This is average wage income, would go on rent. Those days, the apartments were furnished. They come with refrigerators and bed frames and dining tables and so on. All that would be there. So you could you could own nothing in terms of personal possessions other than, I don't know, a mattress and sheets and towels. It was all sort of provided, plus a very generous storage area and a very, very generous garage. And that's for less than 20% of the average income. So, but today that same apartment that may not even have a garage anymore or no storage area, for example, certainly wouldn't come with any furniture or bits and pieces. That same apartment today, that one-bedroom apartment, will take up 65% of the average wage. So the amount of people who are struggling to pay rent isn't just an issue with the black population or the unemployed or whatever, or people with mental health issues. It's not that anymore. Now a vast swathe of people are being pushed into the struggling and living hand to mouth to pay rent. And at the same time, property prices and thus rental prices with it are going through the roof. So this is creating an environment and creating a demand and a need for, well, somebody's got to do something about this. It's crazy. Before there would be, say, 15, a maximum 15% of the population would be in rent control type scenario. Now it's more than half the population is in that. In fact, I would argue, easily more than half the population is now in the need of some sort of rent relief, whether it be a rent control, some sort of welfare assistance, or multiple generations of the family having to live in the apartment. Something had to give. There has to be other adjustments elsewhere, because that's the difference in the purchasing power of the paycheck when it comes to paying rent. So that's the difference. That's why there's a problem today. Or such a vast problem, and such a problem that's seen as is the name CEAR, CEA, I think is the spelling, person, an activist, a radical activist that Mamdani's appointed in New York to deal with this rental, property rental issue, and she's got, as you expect, sort of from a radical activist, she sees it from a purely Marxist perspective. But if we just take away property from the white people, problems are instantly solved, which is an absurd and again a very, very childlike type of reasoning, and illustrates total economic illiteracy. Nonetheless, the point, among the points she makes, what people seem to have missed, is that given that rent and property ownership is now so unaffordable for so many people, there's just a small elite of people that are really owning all the property, and that's wrong. We have to make property affordable for everybody. The average wage earner has to be able to afford property, whether to buy or to rent without having to live hand to mouth. I agree. I mean, what Ms. Weaver says there, fine. Hey, I agree with that. So what caused this mass dilution of the paycheck? Why is it that in 1970, rent would cost you less than 20% of your average wage. Now it's like 65% of your average wage. I mean, like, holy crap. Why don't we address that? So why did that happen? Well, it happened because of, primarily at least, mass migration. But just even putting that aside from it, property used to be a place for people to live. This is residential property. It was a place for people to live. And it wasn't, other than for property developer people, it wasn't an asset class. But now it is. It's now an asset class that all the big banks, all the BlackRocks, all the Vanguards, international property investors, international money laundering syndicates, international buying syndicates coming out of China and fucking Korea and India and everywhere else. It's now an asset class that all of these people are chasing. And I've been at auctions here in Sydney where all the auction, all the final bids that drive the price up into the stratosphere, all the final bids are coming from people that don't speak a word of English and don't even live in Australia. They're not even citizens or residents. They're using proxies to do all the local buying and the bidding and so on. So a property that is notionally for sale for $1 million can easily be bid up to $1.6, $1.7 million, all by Chinese and Indian and so on investors from offshore. So that's and if you look at the property ownership in, say, Manhattan in the United States, half of Manhattan is owned by China. So once you start to unwind the tentacles of it, then the first thing that needs to say, private residential property should not be an asset class for the big cashed up players of the world to play with it. It's not some sort of plaything toy or shouldn't be for these investors. So it has to be taken out, I think, of the asset class. And this is something that Sia Weaver has touched on, or didn't articulate in the way I have there. But that's certainly something to consider. But instead, Ms. Weaver's talking if we take it away from white people, that'll fuck them up. That'll teach those damn Nazis. No. Yeah, if you look at the ownership of property in New York, Chinese own vast swathes of it, Indians own more, and you could go on. There's big Russian investors. You could go on. I mean, you could go through this, and then turn it. So just take it out of the hands of the big players, so it's not an asset investment class. Take private residential property out of that, and then a lot of your problems are solved by default there. Now, coming back to issues of property owners won't pay maintenance on the property because they can't afford it because of rent control. Okay, I can kind of sympathise with that to some extent. Again, but if they're your tenants who you can't kick out, you can't kick them out and you can't put the rent up, and your tenants are vandalising the crap out of the property, why should you keep on paying to repair it? I mean, as a property owner, you shouldn't have to. But that means the quality of the property, in terms of does the plumbing work and, is the door still on the hinges? And the quality of the property declines. It's just being fully maintained. So there is a case there where the government can step in to offer bigger tax write-offs. So increase the tax write-offs. So to still have a degree of maintenance. And to at least a minimum standard, a degree of maintenance, and so the property owner is not out of pocket. Now, if the property owner was concerned about it, because the property is increasing in price, but they can't sell it while it's tenanted to a low quality tenant, but it is still increasing in price, so they don't want to sell it anyway because their asset value is increasing. So there is room to move there, I think. Again, so it needs to be looked at a 360-degree level where again, a tax write-off, an increased tax write-off, which then can be paid back when the property is sold, and these types of things. So user given, so that the day-to-day operation of the property, this is like tenant residential rental property, that the property owner shouldn't be out of pocket. Let's suppose you wanted to force all these property owners to sell their property, but without realizing the inflation level prices you have today. So they may have paid $1 million for it. Technically, it's worth, for example, $2 million today as a property if they sell it at supposed market price. But the market price is all artificial. It's the BlackRocks and the Vanguards and the offshore Chinese buyers that are making the froth that creates that supposed or alleged market price. It's not a market price at all. If the local people of New York only then were buying property, the price wouldn't be anywhere near that high, as in personal purchasing and rental payment would be anywhere near that. So should the property prices in residential terms be brought back to a price that is reflective of local purchasing power market conditions? And if it's local purchasing power market conditions, the property wouldn't be anywhere near the price it is at the moment. So if a property owner sells their property for say what they paid for it, they shouldn't lose money, but say what they paid for it, but not what supposedly it's worth today, then if they take a loss on that in any way, that should be a tax write-off, so they don't lose any money. But do they make a profit on it? Well, no, but that would then take the froth out of the market and would return prices to be relative to the paycheck. And this would then solve many, maybe not every single one, but many of the issues that Sia Weaver and the crazy folks around with their 2-year-old reasoning power would solve many of the problems that they see in terms of equity or terms of outcomes and social outcomes if that froth was taken out. So I would say put your effort there and use tax write-offs and so on to rebalance the outcome so that people aren't losing their shirts and losing money. Are they making the real estate flipping profits that they dream? Well, no, but then it's better that happens and sanity returns to the actual local purchasing power of the market, but equally making sure that no one loses money or loses their shirt. That's important. In terms of the coming back to the tenanting, until the problem is solved of blacks vandalizing the places they live in and the immediate environment around, until that's solved or dealt with, I don't know that the problem with rent control issues and maintenance can be dealt with. Arbitrarily seizing white people's property, that won't fix anything, or certainly not in that regard. So these are the issues. So it's bigger. It's a bigger issue. Excuse me. It's a bigger issue than just stick it up Whitey or Nazis and Hitler. And it's a much bigger issue than that. And there's a lot of interconnected issues. But to take residential property out of being an investment, big player asset class, to take it away from that, that's step number one. And until that happens, I don't know that anything else can be solved. You've been attached to us today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.